All right, so today we're going to take a look at a main idea question for a reading comp passage. The full passage, a link to the full passage is in the description box below. So go ahead and take a moment, click on that link to GMATClub, read through the passage, and when you're ready, come back here. All right, so how did I know this was a main idea question? Well, the big giveaway was this phrase, primary purpose. So it's not just the word purpose, it's the whole phrase. You might see a function question or what some people call a logical structure question that asks, what's the purpose of the second paragraph? Well, that's not main idea because it's only asking about the second paragraph. But here, primary purpose, we know that it is a main idea question. So main idea questions ask about the entire passage. So you're looking for the answer choice that encompasses the entire thing, not just one paragraph. Here I've redacted portions because of copyright, but the only thing that I've taken out from each answer choice was a common phrase, late 18th and early 19th centuries. All right, so this passage in particular falls under a category that I call informational. So there are three passages. There's informational passages, there are persuasive passages, and then there are passages that I call info plus. So these are passages that are pretty much all information, but there's a little bit of opinion from the author. So as you're reading GMAT passages, always try to categorize which of these three it is. So again, informational passages will have no opinion from the author at all. Persuasive passages will have a lot of opinion from the author, and informational plus will pretty much be all information, but maybe there'll be like 3 sentences where there's a little bit of opinion from the author. This passage is informational. It's an interesting passage because the trick, or well, I guess trap rather, of it is that a lot of opinions are presented, but they're opinions of other people. It's opinions of some scholars, some historians, such historians. It's not the author's opinion. So even if there is opinion, if it's not coming from the author's perspective, it's informational. So that's what made this passage tricky. All right, so armed with this knowledge that it's an informational passage, the first thing we can do with the answer choices is look at the verbs on offer. So if it's an informational passage, that means we need a boring verb. Now, these are all pretty boring. The only one that I think we could be a little suspicious of is maybe reevaluate. That's probably not going to be correct for an informational passage, since the action of reevaluating something it's almost like saying that we need to cast it in a new light or rethink it. That would probably be more in line with persuasive or info plus. So probably not the best match. I mean, again, we would read the whole thing if we had more time, but just in terms of the verbs. However, any of these other verbs would probably fit an informational passage. Compare, present, analyze, examine. They're pretty middle of the road, pretty common for info or info plus passages. So we need to get a little deeper. We're left with these 4 that tonally seem to fit. So how you're going to differentiate between them is you need to go back to the passage and read the first sentence of the passage. So again, if you don't have it up, go ahead and click on that. Either look in your official guide or click on that GMATClub link. I'm going to read the first sentence of the passage. Historians remain divided over the role of banks in facilitating economic growth in the United States in the late 18th and early 19th centuries. The first sentence of the passages are incredibly important for main idea because they give you 2 things. They tell you what the topic is, and they tell you the scope. So the topic is pretty much just one word. Like, what are we talking about here? Here, it's about history, right? Or you could say, economic history if you want it to be a little more detailed, but it's about history. And well, what about history is the author interested in? Again, he says historians remain divided over the role of banks in blah, blah, blah. Oh, okay, so he's interested in how historians are divided, that there's a fight going on between historians. So I might write, maybe historians divided. So going back and rereading that, it just kind of really helps you understand the topic and the scope and just puts the whole passage in perspective. If you continue through the passage, you see that this is supported through other language. The second sentence begins, some scholars contend, ... The beginning of the second paragraph says, a growing number of historians argue in contrast, ... So yeah, it's just about presenting this fight going on between historians. I say fight, I'm sure they're very pleasant with each other. All right, so armed with that, let's take a look at the language of the answer choices that we have left. A says, compare the economic role played by Southern banks with the economic role played by banks in the rest of the US. Well, if we choose A, we're basically saying that the economic role of banks, that is sort of the topic and the focus. It's not. It's more about the historians themselves. It's not about, the banks. Also, we don't really get enough of this contrast between Southern and, Northern. And that's not really, again, the scope of the passage. C, present different interpretations of the role played by banks. Okay, it doesn't use the word historians, but I like interpretations, right? That's pretty close to sort of historians being divided. Maybe they're fighting over their interpretation. Okay, we can keep it. D, analyze how the increasing number of banks affected the American economy. Again, we're missing that idea of historians being divided. If I chose D, I'd be saying that, again, it's all about banks and it's all about the number of banks going up and then therefore what happened as a result of that. And that's not sort of the flow of the passage. The passage is like, this is what these historians think. This is what these other historians think. It's a back and forth between the historians. The focus is not on the banks, even though that's what they're arguing about. E says, examine how scholarly opinion, again, I like that, scholarly opinion, that's like historians, regarding the role played by banks in the American economy has changed over time. All right, so clearly C and E are our final two. They have the right focus on historians. Different interpretations, scholarly opinion, both of that is great. So here's where it gets very tricky. We have to look at the very specific differences between these two. Present different interpretations of the role played by banks, or examine how scholarly opinion regarding the role has changed over time. And that idea of changed over time is really the thing that makes E different from C. So what's interesting is it just about different interpretations currently, or is it about how the opinion changed from the past to the present? Again, let's go back to that first sentence. It says, historians remain divided. Oh, okay. So if they remain divided, it means that there is no consensus today. So it's not like it started in one place and now they all agree. It's that, nope, to this day, there are still different interpretations going on. The historians are having an ongoing fight. Therefore, that is why C is the correct answer. E is an excellent second best choice, but that changed over time language implies some sort of consensus has been reached, which is not what the passage says. All right, and just keep in mind when you're doing main idea questions, I'm not saying that you only read the first sentence of the passage, obviously not, but the first sentence of the passage can give us a lot of clarity as to the topic and the scope of these passages.